Welcome to the MMHP and the 989, channeling all styles and eras of Michigan music history.
Hello, Michigan music lovers. This is Scott Baker. I want to welcome you to the Michigan Music History Podcast. I am flanked by Michigan music royalty. To the left, Dr. J. To the right, Sir Fred. We cut from just around the block of the Michigan Rock Legends Hall of Fame in Bay City, Michigan, here at Studio 163 in Essexville. And now it's time to grab a favorite beverage, hit the cruise, and take a trip back with us through Michigan's rich music history.
This podcast is sponsored by our friends at Electric Kitch, located at 2106 Kosciuszko Avenue in Bay City, Michigan. And now, here's your host, Scott Baker.
Welcome back to Studio 163 in Essexville, Michigan, Season 2. We are here on a beautiful, blustery fall day with 60-degree temperatures, which feel pretty nice. Threat of rain, as usual.
Yeah, rain a-coming.
Rain in the cast for weeks to come. And Dr. J's in the house with us tonight. Sir Fred's back in the house. Friend Mike Beatty's doing some videotaping. And special guest in the house tonight. The one, the only, one of our favorite songwriters, modern songwriters, Mr. Donny Brown. How you doing, Donny?
Good, Scott. How are you, brother?
I'm feeling good. Feeling good, man. Feeling good. I'm glad to get you on board. You are a busy man. And the fact that we can track some of our favorite heroes down is a big deal. So thank you for coming.
Well, it was meant to be with us running into each other at Kroger. Where all good people meet.
Yes, that's the place.
Yeah.
All right. So anything new on the table here, Dr. J? Anything going on with the Hall of Fame?
Things moving at a glacial pace.
Okay.
Very, very slowly. Hey, there was a nice interview with Zach Newmeyer.
I saw that.
In Road 9 today. Very nice interview with him.
I haven't had a chance to
a little bit
peruse
about his Bay City roots, and yeah, it was good.
Awesome. Well, cool. We're going to get some more updates as the fall continues here, which these will be broadcast much later. But Dr. J's got the Rock Hall in the works right now, getting ready to roll here on Washington Avenue.
Yep.
And Sir Fred, anything new on the front? Blues, jazz, world music, anything new coming their way?
No, not really.
You've been out digging in the vinyl
Oh yeah, I
archives
go every day.
Yeah. Find anything cool?
Found a bunch of Croatian music today
Ooh.
at a estate sale.
You always bring those big words in here.
I can't pronounce the name of the music though.
That's great. Love how you collect all that. Well, we are blessed to have Donny in the house, and we want to ask some questions that go all the way back. And I definitely want to kick off the questioning tonight. I want to know, you come from a family of music.
I do.
Give us a little background on what it was like to grow up in such a musical family.
Well, I'm the 6 out of 7 kids, and so the real cool thing about all of it actually is just the fact that our house was the band house. So that's really how I got into playing music, because somebody left their instrument there and I picked it up. So, and there were drums set up in the basement, and so it was easy for me to go and jump behind the drums and just start beating the tar out of them, because they weren't mine and my mother didn't mind that, and they heard some proclivity of a beat and decided that I should be a drummer. And yeah, so but it was great. We had a room in our house, and we lived in a small house. For 7 kids, we lived in an extremely small house. We had 4 bunk beds in one room was about this size. So 4 beds, 2 bunk beds. And this is where all the boys slept, in this one bedroom. And then the room next to us was the stereo room. And so we had, crates and crates of LPs, and my parents tore the wallpaper off of the wall and said, "Go ahead, it's yours. Do whatever you want." So our whole upstairs was graffitied, and it was a lot of rock and roll quotes, a lot of stuff from Deep Purple lyrics and Black Sabbath lyrics and things like that, and Black Oak, Arkansas, and any band that any of my older brothers or sisters were into, we had it all in there. So Montrose, yeah, all the stuff I grew up listening to. You know.
What was the first thing that caught your ear? Obviously, your music was all around, and you guys had art going on.
Well, we had my dad was a foundry worker, and he played accordion, and he sang, and my mom loved to sing, and gosh, if I just went through every sibling, I'd probably name a whole concert band of what everybody played. So there was always somebody playing something in the house. But then my oldest brother, Randy, got hip, and he decided that he was going to be a bass player. So he brought electric instruments into the house. My sister had an organ in the living room, and she played that just by ear and would pick up anything and just be able to play it. But I digress. I forgot what you were saying.
I was saying, what was the first piece of music that you were like, you are surrounded with it, but something must have been, there's that.
I mean, they're really just my older sisters and my older brother's record collection, everything, because they were constantly playing the Beatles. They were constantly playing the Hollies. My brother was a trumpet player, so we had Sly and the Family Stone and Chase and Chicago Transit Authority, and so I grew up listening to all sorts of different things, Maynard Ferguson, and so it was a good breeding ground of eclectic music. One thing that we never did listen to in the house too much was blues. My brother Ron was a big blues guy and was into Johnny Winter and Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters, but I don't recall any of those records in the collection too much.
Wow.
Just people covering those songs and playing them on British rock records. Yeah.
Wow.
So you grew up in Saginaw, right?
I did. I grew up on the east side of Saginaw. Do you know Saginaw well?
Oh, pretty well, yeah. Did you go to Saginaw High then?
No, I did not go to Saginaw High. I went to Weber, and I was going to go to Saginaw High, but it was rough. And so simply put, and I was a little kid. I was I'm a 5'7" now, but and when I graduated high school, I think I was 5'1", still just a short kid. And so my older brothers ended up leaving Saginaw Public Schools and going out to a Catholic high school out in the township. And that was actually a very saving grace for me, because I just could kind of relax instead of just like being hyper alert, because I was in a tough situation at school, because it was rough. It was just, you would find yourself in the wrong place at the wrong time with people, and it was just tough going over there sometimes. So, but
where on the east side were you?
I was just right near Weber School, across from Lufkin Rule. On that street. Because
I lived on Robinwood.
All right, well, Lowell and Hess.
That's the next street.
It is Lowell and Hess.
That's something.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, that was the title of your first EP as a
Hess
solo.
Street, Hess Street EP. And in fact, if you see it, and anybody sees it, and they see that's our graffiti walls. All the artwork of the record is the graffiti walls and I just did that as, of course, an homage to my parents, and to being able that was enough to me, I mean, to be able to play music and to be able to grow up learning to respect and love music like that is the greatest gift that I've ever gotten in my life, from my parents, because they just instilled that in us and let us blossom with it. You go find your thing, and you love it, then you stay true to it, and you mean it, and you give it what you got, and it'll be fulfilling to you, and that's enough. And so that's kind of been the mantra of my siblings and I as far as music, and I'm fortunate.
Oh, that's pretty great. Really,
it is. Okay. I went to school, and when I was in 6th grade, my oldest brother was just leaving Weber School, and he was a trumpet star, and he was like he got a scholarship to college for trumpet, and his band director been told by my mother, well, my two younger sons who are 5th and 4th grade right now, they're playing drums and saxophone, and you might want to hear them. And so we were rising stars at Weber Junior High School.
Was it Mr. Matthews?
And it was Mr. Nyquist. It was Jim Nyquist.
Oh, so he
Mr.
was
Matthews,
after.
after. And Mr. Nyquist came in, and what was really awesome is that I took 1 year of school with Mr. Nyquist, and Mr. Nyquist went to the school and said, we have to have a drum set here. We can't keep playing, somebody play bass drum and somebody play the snare drum and somebody play the cymbals. You got to get a drum set. And as soon as the school got a drum set, he got an older student who played drum set to teach me. So the first beats that I learned were from a guy named Mario Jeter playing drum set, who already played drum set. And he sat down with me and said, this is how you do it. And so I started playing drum set, and next thing you know, it's 8th grade and we're playing Pick Up the Pieces from Average White Band. The crowd was going crazy. That was really my first time playing drum set and having people go apeshit. And it was awesome.
That is a cool story.
Yeah, it's great.
And which school was Nyquist at, Mr. Nyquist?
Mr. Nyquist was at Weber Junior High.
The Weber Junior High, okay.
He was a Weber Wildcats. And, he was such a cool cat. He was such a cool guy. He had a few students who were standouts, and he would give us a second band class so that we could work on another instrument. So for a while, I played trumpet and drums. But that kind of fell by the wayside when I decided that drums were getting more attention from girls. So excellent choice. Yeah.
When did it lead to sneaking out and doing some rehearsing with some friends and playing in the garage?
That was high school. Well, I already played in bands, but like I said, growing up on the east side, I wasn't too social and didn't run around other than just played sports and things like that. And we had our own band at the house. My brother played bass, and my brother Ron sang, and my other brother Danny played saxophone, and I played drums. And so it was like there was a sound there. We could play and we could sing, and we always had the records upstairs, the record room, and we would just go up there and sing everything.
Wow.
So yeah,
a lot of you mentioned earlier the bands like the Beatles and some of the harmony-oriented bands. Did you and your brothers, I assume, were jumping all over that? Yeah.
I think I have I'm drawn to. I can sing guitar solos because when we were kids, we did dishes, and my mother would assign who did the dishes, and so we would just pick a record and we would sing the record. So for a long time it was Made in Japan from Deep Purple. And my sister, when it would get to Ritchie Blackmore's guitar solos, she'd look at me and I'd be like, okay. So I'd sing all of Ritchie Blackmore's guitar solos.
Whoa.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can still sing some of them. I probably can,
Excellent.
You remember riffs and things like that,
Did your brother Jaime play?
Lauer played, he played saxophone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the one who played saxophone. Lauer, but he sang too. So for a while there, he played with the Furlo Brothers, who were Mick and Tony Furlo's cousin.
Right.
He played with them at Meinberg's, and they had a band, and I can't remember what the hell it was called. But for the life of me, I can't remember. But he was the lead singer of that band, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, when did you put together your first band?
High school. High school is when I got to high school, I started playing in the pep band. And that's where I first started meeting girls, because you play drums and you're playing in the pep band, and it was awesome. And but then I, met this guy through that guy through this guy, and next thing you know, there was 4 of us in a garage and 3 guys playing guitar and wondering which one's going to stop playing guitar and pick up the bass. And it was all like, okay, let's play some Cheap Trick. Let's play. Let's do this Nugent tune. Let's play this, and so. Lots of high school parties where it was like, okay, hey, can your band come? And it's like, sure, we can. So, yeah.
Well, it sounded like a lot of fun. Did you guys have a band name?
We had a band. We had our first band, and I still have the card in my pocket, I think, was a band called Chunks. Chunks, Chunks. Because my brother drank too much and just blew chunks everywhere.
Yes.
And so we were like, okay, that was my younger brother, Danny. And so, okay, it's Chunks. And we stupidly got a bunch of cards printed up and gave them to our parents and just like, get us some gigs. Your friends want to hear some Nugent and some Cheap Trick and some Zeppelin and a little bit of Robin Trower and things like that. They want to hear that. But it was just songs and things that I heard my older brother's band do and stuff that, maybe we couldn't pull off as well because those guys had 5 years on us and 5 really good formative years. Mm-hmm. But we went out there and just gave it hell, I remember being kicked out of quite a few houses and rushing my drums out of the basement. So it served its purpose.
Wow. When I first met you, you were playing with Mick Furlo.
Well, we were just speaking about the Furlo Brothers, and Mick's cousin Louis and Paul and Chris, they lived over there off of Gratiot, and they had a drums and everything in their basement. Louis played bass, and Gigi is his nickname. But he said to me one day, he's like, my cousins have a band. I was still in high school. He said, my cousins have a band, and their drummers either don't show up or show up real late or get a substitute and they don't know anything about anything. It's like they need somebody who can just be steady and be solid. And so I went over while I was still in high school and I met Mick Furlo, and I actually went down on Hamilton Street and I parked by Case Funeral Home and then walked over to the Old Town Saloon and stood in the window and watched Tony and Mick play.
Right.
And I pretty much just had a checklist, and I was just like, I know that song. I know that song. I know that song. I know that song. I don't know that song, and it's just like they'd play something by Marshall Tucker, and it's just like, I don't know Marshall Tucker. We don't have a Marshall Tucker record in the Brown house, but I know everything else. Click, 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 click. And then so when I was still in high school, I did my first gig with Mick and Tony, and they just kind of like brought me up, and I learned a lot from those guys as far as just like, put it out there, give it a shot, belt it out. Don't be afraid to miss a note. Don't be afraid to just give it a shot. And I loved playing with them. I had a lot of joyful moments doing that, playing with them.
Did you play in bars?
Yeah. Yeah.
No grief for being underage?
No. And I looked 15. I did. I looked 15. And I had a note from my mother, and Rosie's Roaring 20s saw the note. Rosie did, and I played there with Mick and Tony, and it's just like, he's 18 years old and he can be in a bar. So yeah, so it was awesome. And then Mick and his brother kind of stopped playing together, and we just became the Mick Furlo Band. And then that's when the 80s were happening, and we just, we were playing 5 nights a week back when you could play 5 nights a week. You remember that, Fred?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And that was a beautiful thing. That's before Scott's time, but it was awesome.
We've heard that so much coming through here, when you could do that. And it seems to be the catchphrase of every interview we've thrown in here from musicians, like music was so plentiful.
It was. And not just that, but, you could still play 5 nights a week and not just be in the same spot. When I went to Michigan State, at the very end of the 80s in 89. And I remember going there and seeing a band on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, seeing live original music every single night, and seeing crowds of people in the bars just wanting to hear this stuff and supporting it, And so I got lucky that the time was right for that for me, because we started the Verve Pipe in 92. And before that, I played with Water for the Pool, and Water for the Pool had a great following. and we started making our own record, and the brothers from this other band, Johnny with an I, started making their own record, and then we played a gig together, and decided that we wanted to start a band together instead of just doing what we were doing. So,
And that was what year?
that was 92. That's when we
92.
started the Verve Pipe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the guys that were in Water for the Pool, I saw you
I
guys
remember.
play in Bay City.
Yeah.
Used to play at, was the little place
Back
like
streets.
Backstreet.
Back
and,
streets.
and wasn't there another place on Washington Avenue, like a small club or something like that? A bar? I can't remember
Back
what it
streets
was.
is right off of Washington.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But anyways, I really liked Water for the Pool. You guys were...
I love that band.
you were playing some, didn't call it alternative music. It was what, new wave?
I don't know.
You were playing in Excess and
Well,
stuff like that.
I first saw Water for the Pool when I was playing with Mick Furlo, because Water for the Pool was younger guys like me, and I was still a young guy playing with Mick Furlo, and they were playing in the Old Town Saloon. So they'd be playing Gang of Four and XTC and stuff like that down in the Old Town Saloon, and Mick Furlo was playing U2 and things like that up in the main dance floor, and that band broke up. When Mick Furlo broke up, I started playing with a classic rock band from Bay City called Mirage, which is on, I think, their 123rd member. I was number 26. I was their 26th member. It was awesome because they were all just great guys. It was just like, let's go there and have a shitload of fun. Can I say that?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Let's go there and just be silly and dipshitty and have a shitload of fun and entertain people. And, we'll get paid for it. I was like, all right, great. So we did all sorts of stupid shit in that band. I have an alter ego named Tony Nevada. And between sets, I would do like Tony Nevada live. So somewhere there's videotape of me doing Tony Nevada.
Is Tony Nevada
Tony Nevada is a lounge singer.
Oh.
And what was really awesome is I made a little cassette tape of just applause and people going apeshit crazy. And I gave it to the sound man, and I'm just like, listen, if people aren't into this, as soon as I finish singing a line and I say thank you, crank the audience. And so he was hip to it. He was like, I'd be like, I can't remember the song that I was singing. I usually sing My Way. And now the end is near. Thank you. And people were just like, what the shit? This is Drifters on Midland Road. What the hell is this? We came to see this classic rock band, but it was fun.
That's cool. How long were you in that band?
I was in Mirage for 2 years. Yeah, 2 years. And then Water for the Pool started back up, and I jumped into Water for the Pool.
Wow, that's how I kind of first heard of you, was through Water the Pool. I know my wife Julie, she followed that band everywhere
I
from
like that
Mackinac
band.
City to wherever they would go, and Mark Miller and Whitey and you.
Yeah.
And she got so many names that have been through that band over the years.
There were tons of people.
Yeah, but-
I honestly, I liked the band better not being in it because I really liked to see them play. And I thought that originally when they were the original members, the 4 original guys who started the band, I really enjoyed like the chemistry of how they played and how they did what they did, knowing that it was still, they were playing a lot of covers, but just their interpretation of it just was something that I liked and respected.
Who was the original 4 in that band?
It was Brian Westfall on drums, Brian Stout on lead vocals, Chris Dorema playing bass, and Dean Vanston playing guitar. And then we got Dean to play with Mick Furlo. Okay. And then Dean left Mick Furlo. I left Mick Furlo. I went it with Mirage, and then we got Water for the Pool back together. So.
Oh yeah, I forgot Dean was in it too.
Yeah.
Talked to him monthly. And
yeah.
He's got some stories too from that whole time period.
Yeah.
Oh.
It was a great time. I mean, it was a time that it was a golden age of Hamilton Street. The fact that you could go, I remember going downstairs playing at Hamilton Street, coming down the block, seeing the Microdots from Traverse City at J.B. Meinberg's, going across the street, seeing the Burdens at Old Town Saloon, going upstairs and seeing My Dog Bob. And it's just like all of those bands were kick-ass for what they were doing. And they all did it with conviction, and they all did it with a lot of love. And it was like, man, I mean, you can see 4 bands of that caliber in a block and a half area. It's like, you know, something's going on. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
It was badass. It was badass. Fred, you remember all those bands, don't you?
Yeah, definitely.
You remember the Microdots?
Yeah.
I remember seeing them do I'm Your Dog by Iggy Pop.
Right.
And the keyboardist sat there and panted during the whole thing, and drool just coming off of his tongue like a dog, just playing this song, and just stayed with it and played the part till there's just like this puddle of drool on his keyboard. And I was just loving it. I just loved it. I started talking to the guitarist, and I was up in Traverse City, and I did a gig. I can't remember who I was playing with, but I saw this guy playing mandolin, and I said, "Did you used to play in the Microdots?" He's like, "Yeah." It's a guy named Don Julin who was with Billy Strings for a long time. Played with Billy Strings for like 3 years, and he was a guitarist for the Microdots. I was like, shit, it's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, but
That's so cool.
but see, that's the thing is like you all remember like those moments in Saginaw where you just saw somebody get up, whether it was Doug Sheltraw, just start playing guitar on something with My Dog Bob, and you just went, oh crap. Or even more, saw Doug Sheltraw and Mark Simone and Bob Grunner with Raymond out at the Planet 8 when I was still underage. I snuck into the Planet 8 out on Holland Road and watched Bob Grunner drum. Now, do you know Bob Grunner?
No, don't know.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
I saw his final show. I was on the cruise. We put it together for the Blues Society. He was on Oxygen
Bigfoot
that
Bob,
night.
Yeah.
Whew.
What a mother. You know, and fortunately I was able to get some drum lessons from him. He's no longer with us, rest his soul, but there was no better groover in the Saginaw area, from the Saginaw area, than Bubba. His nickname is Bubba, and he was a badass. He was super badass. I remember watching him. He played with the Saginaw Valley jazz band, and Mike Brushes on keyboards, Ron Lopez on guitar, Bob Grunner on drums, and I'm just like, holy shit,
That's a
this
jaw
rhythm
dropper.
section is killing. Yeah, and that was where my brother went to school playing trumpet, so that's how I got indoctrinated into all that stuff too. He got a trumpet scholarship to Saginaw Valley.
How did you link up with Brian Vander Ark and his band?
That was we did a gig in Kalamazoo. Water for the Pool did, and his old band did it as well, and we were co-headliners for this gig, and that was a fateful gig because my recollection of it is that our bass player and our guitarist were about to get into fisticuffs on the stage because they were just at each other's throats by then. And a couple of the guys in their band got too high and too drunk at their gig. And the next day, Brian and I talked and just said, well, we don't want that in either of our bands. And we need a singer, and they need a drummer, and they need a guitarist, and we need this. And so it was like, yeah, it was just, that's what we did. We met at Wendy's at Michigan State. Wendy's on Grand River. We just stopped into Wendy's and just said, well, you want to do this? It's like, yeah, let's do it. So that was it. That's how the Verve Pipe started at Wendy's.
How about the name Verve Pipe?
That was a misstep. It was one of the guys had writings all over his jeans. A guy I used to play with in Water for the Pool, Mark Smith. Now Dr. Mark Smith up in Charlevoix, I believe. But Magic was his nickname. Magic had these jeans, and he had these sayings written all over them, and one of them was Industrial Verve. And I remember seeing Industrial Verve, and so we were trying to come up with a name for the band, and we were going to be Elemental Pop. And it was like, oh, that sounds like a pop band. Well, I don't know if we're a pop band. It's just like an Elemental Pipe. No, and it's just one of those things. But it's highly regrettable that we, had such a silly name. But, that means nothing.
I was going to ask you, before all that took place, and while you're going through this upbringing around here in the Saginaw area, was there anybody that was taking the next step out of Michigan to the bigger shows, the better albums, and you were like, wow, that's something different from just playing bar shows and cover bands?
I wasn't that in tune with that. It was insular enough that I didn't know about Bob Seger being out of Ann Arbor. I just knew that Bob Seger had Live Bullet out, and that the bass player who I wanted to play in my band in high school could play Live Bullet front to back and play the bass parts really well. And I was like, I love him. Great. He introduced me to Seger, and when you listen to a guy that has that breadth of talent, that gift of that voice, and that gift of that ability to songwrite at that level, and then he just happens to surround himself with the most kick-ass band that is just a fucking machine, that just seems like rock and roll to you. It's just like another album that I've got there. It doesn't seem like, hey, that's a guy who drinks Vernors and knows what Michigan is all about.
Right.
But
I just wondered if I know some people have seen along the way, oh, hey, our friends over there, or Iggy Pop, or Dick Wagner, Saginaw, or however it was,
Dick Wagner was not an influencer or anything, but meeting him, when I get a chance to meet these people, it's just like I hold them in reverence, because it's like I know that they've done things that I admire, and I've listened to that. My brother cranked Mystery Man ad nauseum, and off the Frost record, and I love that song. I love it, and I would cover it, but I don't think I could do it justice. Scotty Vandal can play some of the guitar shit for me, but there's a ton of great shit in that one song, and it's a brilliant song, isn't it? Don't you think?
Oh yeah,
that is a badass. Are you familiar with it?
Oh, certainly. I thought the Frost were going to be much bigger than they turned out to be.
Yeah.
Wrong record label.
I just wondered. I never ever asked you that, if you ever had a thing where you saw bigger stars because you seen someone actually get loose and do that thing, And luckily for guys like me coming up in my generation, we already knew about Dick and Iggy and Bob, but we had we had Larry McCray, doing things.
It's just like I look at Larry and I know his talent. And I hear what's coming out of his mouth, and you meet Larry and that is a genuine soul. So it's like, it doesn't surprise you when people are gravitating towards that and you hear his talent. It's a little different when your music isn't just part of your personality. It's kind of what you do when you play rock and roll. If you're not Iggy Pop and that pseudo punk ethic defines you, if you're just in a rock band like the Verve Pipe, it's like, well, I love rock, and that's what I'll do. I play that, but that's not all I like, and so it isn't just who I am, I guess.
Awesome.
Does that make any sense?
No, totally. I love how you put it together that way. It's
but
you took the soul of the person that took off to a bigger thing, and it's there. It's ingrained in them, and it just spews out of them at all times.
Well, I've been in the last 3 years ago, I got a call from I did some recording down at Big Sky in Ann Arbor, and Jeff Michael, the owner of that, calls me up and he's like, "Are you available to do some drum tracks?" I'm like, yeah. I'm like, "What is it?" And he's like, "I'm not sure if they're going to come in here, but if they come in here, they're going to need a drummer." I'm like, he says, "I'll call you back." Calls me back 2 weeks later, and he's like, It's for Drew Abbott." And I'm like, "Drew Abbott? Holy shit." And that's like, yes, I want to meet Drew Abbott. Yes, I want to talk to Drew Abbott. Yes, I want to play music with Drew Abbott. And so it was awesome. I went and I played on Drew's record, and then Drew called me up and he's like, I got 5 live shows for the summer. He's like, can you play any of them? And I just said, "Give me the dates." And so I went out and played live with Drew. And from Drew, I met, this guy from Savage Grace, Al Jacquet, down there, and all these guys, and I got to play with Jimmy Alfredson, smoking B3 player out of Lansing. I already knew Jimmy, but it was just great to play with him. And so from there, I met Thornetta Davis, and from there I got a gig playing with Thornetta, and so I just go if somebody wants me to play music with them and is willing to roll the dice with me, I'm going to walk in prepared and smack the shit out of it. I want to. And so
Awesome.
So the Drew gig happened because I walked in the door and I was all ears, and I hadn't even met him yet, and he was in the other room tuning his guitar up and playing riffs, and I'm just like, it's just insane that I know that is the guitarist from Live Bullet without even being able to see him through this window, because I can just hear the tone and hear how he plays, where he bends notes, when he bends notes, how he moves up and down the neck. And it's just like, I have heard that on so many Seeger songs. And that's you. That's you. That's not what Bob telling you to do. That's just you giving yourself to Bob. And I told him that. I've told him that numerous times. It's just like, I'm grateful to be sitting here with you. So
He's one of those cats I've always wanted to meet and talk to.
he's a good cat.
That's so cool. I remember, that's one of my questions for you later on was going to be at the gym, or the Abbott story, because I seen you pop out some gigs when was it 2 years ago, just before the COVID?
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa, there's another crown jewel here.
Well, it was just nice to do because, guys like that, I don't mind being the weakest link, just walking.
It's just a great band.
Walk in
There's
the
no
room,
weak links.
It's just like, geez, I'm just going to be held up by these guys. I'll just play, they're going to sound good.
This podcast is sponsored by our friends at Electric Kitsch, located at 2106 Kosciuszko Avenue in Bay City, Michigan. They offer new and used records, including local to Michigan original vinyl and CDs, as well as clothing, electronic equipment, funky household items, music gear, and stringed instrument repair. You can find them on the web or call 989-402-1411.
Well, now going into the very beginnings of the Verve Pipe, was your songwriting already forming at that point? Being that,
Yeah.
Because I do want to ask you about songwriting in a little bit here, but I want to know, when did you already have some songs on the table? Like, hey, I got something to offer here now, or was that coming later?
Well, no, with Water for the Pool, we were making our first record, and Brian's band was making their first record. And so how we started the Verve Pipe is the very first record of the Verve Pipe is we took the songs off Brian's record that Brian wrote and took the songs off our record that we wrote and put it together and called it the Verve Pipe, and kind of re-recorded that. Brian re-sang some of the stuff that was on our record, and I played drums on everything that was on Brian's.
Suffered a head injury album?
Yeah, exactly.
Now, is that the record with the Freshman?
That is the original record with the Freshman.
Yeah.
Well, when I met Brian, when I saw that old band, they were already playing that. I heard that song, and it was just a totally different version of it, but it was that song.
I remember I was working in a restaurant coming out of high school. I graduated in '91, and the cashier was a drummer in a band called the Rugby Mothers, John Curry, around
I
here.
know John Curry.
And John had hung with you guys and got your cassette. And he says, after work, I got something I got to play for you. He says, it's a new bunch of buddies of mine called the Verve Pipe. He puts it in, but he only wanted to play me the Freshman. And he sat and cried and says, this is where it's at. He's going to do something.
Wow.
And we were at the Texan here in Essexville. And I'm like, who's
Curry
the Verve
and
Pipe?
The Rugby Mothers. We played a lot of gigs with those guys.
Yeah.
We did a lot.
And then you guys signed your deal, and eventually got reissued without the Freshman on it. It took me another, probably till 2004 or 5, I found a copy of the original CD that had the Freshman on it, finally, in a used store, and grabbed that bad boy.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you heard the original version of it?
Yeah.
Before the...
Well, the I've suffered a head injury version.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That was when that tape came out, because had tapes back then, And you guys had just released it, and John had to play that for me, and he says, you won't believe the song. And
I knew it was a great song. But it personally never just rocked me and never moved me. And I remember our second ever gig, we played on Mackinac Island. And like our first ever gig for the Verve Pipe we did in Chicago, and the next night we had to play on Mackinac Island. It's just like the worst fucking booking agent you could ever have. It's like, well, let's play all night in Chicago, let's lose an hour, and then have to drive up and catch a ferry, and then play a club so we were played at Horns in Mackinac Island, our second ever gig. And I remember the version that Brian would do at that time, him just doing it with him on acoustic or him on electric with a delay pedal. And there was a guy dancing and he was just crying and the girl with him was just crying and they were dancing to it. And I was like, wow, this has got something more to it.
More than you had felt at the time.
But it was a journey with that song. That song, that song got re-recorded for the Villains record. And I didn't think it was really being done justice. I thought it was being fucked up. I thought it was wrong to record it that way because I thought that we were making the song have less of an impact than it did.
Now, was that, did Jerry Harrison produce
Jerry
that
Harrison
record?
produced that one. Yes, he produced that record and he produced that version of The Freshman. And we released that record with that version of The Freshman on it. And then the record label got smart and said, go and re-record that song because you have a different version in you that's better. Because we did have a different version in us that was better. And so we did. We went and we re-recorded it. And that was really a highlight because...
Was that with Jack Joseph?
That was with Jack Joseph Puig in Ocean Way.
Yeah.
So in the room where the Beach Boys recorded, in the room where so many great records were made, And so we were just in there and it was great.
How did you get involved with Jerry Harrison?
Jerry Harrison was recording in Milwaukee because he was working with Crash Test Dummies and was recording in Madison at Smart Studios with Butch Vig for something. And then he came over to Milwaukee and the Verve Pipe was on tour and we had just had I believe we had a couple of irons in the fire with labels like, okay, these guys might get picked up. And it was at that time, that was everything, I mean, like to be able to get on a major label, that was the holy grail.
So you got Harrison to produce before you were on RCA?
Jerry came over to hear us.
Oh, okay.
And I think he had, maybe he had gotten sent there by RCA. So he came to a club in Milwaukee. We were playing at Shank Hall in Milwaukee, and Jerry Harrison shows up.
We played there.
Yeah.
Shank Hall.
Yeah. And the Verve Pipe manager called me up and he said, Jerry Harrison might show up, So Jerry showed up and we just talked to him, and he was just a very down-to-earth guy.
And I want to take it back a step, though. You suffered a head injury. You said it was a compilation of songs from Water for the Pool and songs that Brian and his brother had. Yeah. How long did you guys go out supporting that, or just played around, or did your thing? Was that like a year or two before Pop Smear, or did you start writing, or how did that work?
I think we were already because we were what we ended up doing, because we were in two bands that were happening in the college circuit, is we would just say that we were, if we went to Kalamazoo and Water for the Pool had the good night, where you could make a percentage of the door. It was like, well, we're the Verve Pipe now, but we're gonna call ourselves Water for the Pool, and we're gonna go there and we'll make all this money. So we started making money and saving money to record, because we had a recording Jones. We were just all about like, let's write songs and record, and write songs and record, and write songs and record. And then we got our new guitarist, who was our new guitarist and our keyboardist, who were the irons in the fire that really got us going. So we decided that we were going to get a keyboardist because we were writing songs and we wanted keyboards on them. And so we were asking Randy Sly, who was playing in Bob Harvey at the time, and who now plays with the Verve Pipe. But Randy was like busy with Bob Harvey. He's like over living in Providence, Rhode Island. And he's like, I come back to Michigan to see my folks, and I will come back and I play on your records, but I'm not going to join the band or anything. So we weren't so sold on on keyboards. We were just like, we got to have something, you know. And then when I played with Mick Furlo, and I left Mick Furlo, Dean Vincent and I left Mick Furlo. They got a guitarist to replace Dean right away, but they were having a problem finding a drummer. And so Mick came up to me and said, can you stick around? Can you stick around and while we find a drummer, you'll play with the new guitarist. And the new guitarist was AJ Donny. So I played with AJ for a month and a half. And I was just like, holy crap, this guy can play guitar. So when the Verve Pipe was talking about getting a lead guitarist, I just called AJ.
Tell me a little bit about the Brian leaving the band, or how that happened, and how it was
Brian Stout.
Yeah,
And
he came with you from your half of the.
Yeah, I think.
Was that a sad time? Or?
Yeah, it was not a cool thing, and not to me, and I don't exactly remember how it went, but it wasn't my decision alone, but.
This is just before you guys recorded Pop Smear? Or just after that came out?
Just after Suffered a Head Injury came out.
Okay.
Because we were just released the record, and I remember AJ coming and doing an audition and knowing every song on the record inside and out and playing burning solos and just making us all go. And in fact, when he showed up for the audition, you know, AJ was a gearhead, so he had, you know, a Marshall 412, and then next to that was a Fender 212, and then another Fender 212 cabinet, and then a rack of outboard gear, and then another rack of outboard gear, and then a pedal board about the size of these sofa cushions. and we started playing the first song of the audition, and he just, you know, I could just see I had played with him, but the brothers hadn't, and I could just see them go, oh, wow. This is what it's like to play with a guitarist, because AJ was a guitarist. He knows the isms of guys who play and the styles of how they do what they do. He's his own animal, and he's such a great guitarist, but he brought all that to the table. And I remember going in the restroom with Brian after the audition. We played the whole record front to back, and he just burned through it. And I'm like, I got to take a leak. So we go in the bathroom, and I looked at Brian, and Brian looked at me, and I said, what do you think? He said, I think we're going to need a bigger van, because he had all that shit. That was all he said. I was like, oh, fuck it. Well,
here he is.
Yeah, so that was awesome. But you saw the Verve Pipe. You saw AJ.
Oh, yeah.
He's a phenom. He's great.
I just wonder, I know that you had gone a ways back with Brian Stout.
Yeah, that was just I don't know exactly how that went down. That was a tumultuous time in my life, and I know it was I think it was a tumultuous time in his life. And, you know, and then having the other guys do what they want with the band, their opinions, and I was in an unfortunate situation that I had to, that it was like, well, we're going to move on without you. And I don't feel good about it to this day, but I mean,
understandably,
it was just one of those things.
And out of those, you got AJ on board, and when did the songwriting begin, and how much did you start?
I was already writing songs, because I had written some for what ended up being the second record. And that's kind of where we came alive, you know, during the recording of our second record, Pop Smear. And we just kind of hit our stride, and we started playing, I don't know, we were playing rooms we had a couple of places in Chicago we played Traverse City, we went down to Columbus, Ohio, we played Cleveland, we played Bloomington, Indiana, St. Louis, Missouri. So, I mean, these are all van trips with this band that we're going to play, that we had our own little crowd at every single one of these. And we ended up selling, you know, thousands of our second record, because we marketed ourselves that way. And Fred mentioned School Kids Records in Ann Arbor. It's like there was Warehouse Records in Michigan and School Kids, and we had a had it so that we had our records en masse in those every single time. And so whenever we were coming to town, it was like, go to school, kids, or go to warehouse and pick up our record. And we would go there and do an acoustic set before the show and things like that. We were smart when it came to that kind of thing. We were smart, and we marketed ourselves. So.
And that's how you attracted the interest of the major labels,
Yes,
right?
that's exactly how.
Yeah, good strategy.
Yeah. That's a great story, and I've heard that story in other forms before over the years. And Elemento Pop became a name,
our management company,
for your management company,
exactly.
which came out of that too. So you retained that.
Yeah.
To this day, I mean, I'll pop on Verve Pipe things and read little things to see what people are saying. Pop Smear, I think, still is one of the most talked about records.
It's a great. It was done at a great time. Everybody was like, we were a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. We weren't like a rock band. We were like, well, we got to throw some Jellyfish in, or throw some, not being afraid to put a Latin groove on a record, and things like that. It was fun. Yeah.
Was it mainly a Midwest tour there for Pop Smear then?
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
It was.
And how did the record companies become known of all this sales?
We were contacting them. And we also worked with Aware Records. And are you familiar with Aware? Mm-hmm. Aware was out of East Lansing, but also based out of Chicago. And it's Greg Latterman. And Greg Latterman ended up getting his own label through Columbia. And I think his first signing was John Mayer, and his second was Train. So Greg Latterman's done okay. But Greg Latterman, at the time, Greg Latterman was he was this kid who was going and finding music and finding bands that were not yet known, but known, and getting them recognized. And record labels started paying attention to what Greg Latterman was into, and Greg Latterman made these compilations. So, on the first compilation that we were on, Hootie and the Blowfish, before they were signed, were on that. Wow. Dave Matthews was on that. There was like these bands that were just not signed yet, but were well known. There was a band called Everything, and the gig that got us. We did quite a few gigs where this guy from Polygram flew out, and this guy from another label flew out, and then we did this showcase for Aware in Nashville. And at the showcase for Aware was a band called Everything, Better Than Ezra, Edwin McCain, the Verve Pipe. I'm trying to think of who else was there. I don't know. There were maybe 8 bands, and it was just like it was a 328 Performance Hall, and at one end was the Verve Pipe, and then right after that, Everything played at the other end, and then Better Than Ezra came on at one end, and then at the other end, this other band's Edwin McCain starts up. And I remember just seeing these bands and knowing a little bit of their story, and knowing that they were already hot shit in their areas, and that they had a song that was definitely a radio song. I remember hearing Better Than Ezra and going, "Oh, it's good even for you," hearing that song and going, "That's a fucking radio song. That'll be a hit." And sure enough, next thing you know, Better Than Ezra gets a record deal. And that's exactly what happened. We went to that thing in Aware, and the vice president of Atlantic was there, and Brian Malouf from RCA was there, and we finished with our set. And I have to tell you, we fucking ruled. We came out like a prize fighter and just took them down. I mean, like, I talked to other bands that were there. Oh, Vertical Horizon were there too. Vertical Horizon. So another band that got that deal. So, I talked to bands and that were there, and they were like, "Holy shit. I'm glad our band didn't have to play after you guys just fucking buried it,
Awesome.
And at the end of that, I mean, we were all high. We were all just like walking off stage, just like, man, we could feel the energy in the room. And we walked back there, and in the room is the vice president of A&R from Atlantic, and starts talking to us, and then he leaves, and as soon as he leaves, the Brian Malouf from RCA comes walking in and starts talking to us and just wants to meet us and says hello and everything. And I remember getting a call from our manager, the Verve Pipe's manager, and he said, well, you have to start thinking about it if you want to be on Atlantic or if you want to be on RCA. And I was like, well, that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. And so we were, walking on high as the clouds, and we decided to go. At the time, Atlantic had so many acts, and we were tied in with a lot of them. We had played numerous shows opening for all of these bands who were just trying to get over the cusp of and getting a little bit more well known. And we were the local band who could still bring some people out. And so we were doing the show with them when they came through Michigan or in Chicago or things like that. And so it just seemed there were so many of those just trying to get their footing, and they were all on Atlantic. And RCA didn't have anybody who was getting their footing, but didn't have anybody who was doing what we were doing. And so I think that's why we went with RCA. And then they hooked us up with Jerry, and the first record was cool. It was fun to make. It was I recall Jerry kind of saying that he had Lyme disease or Epstein-Barr because he was sleeping a lot. And I didn't like that side of it too much, but I liked the sound of the record, and I attribute that to Carl Dörfler, who was the engineer on the record. And I still get people coming up to me talking to me about the drum sounds. So
yeah, it was a positive experience studio wise for that record.
I mean, it was a great experience. I mean, there was good and bad, just like anything else, because egos and because of things come into it. But I look back on it much more fondly now. Yeah.
I noticed that Vander Ark was always had more songs than anybody else.
Yeah,
but you didn't have any songs on
Villains record. Yeah, Villains
after having several on Pop Smear.
I think what ended up happening is the reason that happened is because I was kind of taking care of everything for the band as far as selling CDs, as far as like all of the day-to-day management shit, and stupidly, I wish I wish I had written a song and gotten it on that record, because the Freshman made that record a million seller.
Yeah, that's
and every single song on it became a million seller because of it, So bless Brian, and there are a lot of songs on that record that I like, some more than others, but I didn't get any songs on that record. So
yeah, you were probably with the release of that record, really, you guys were probably maybe the biggest Michigan band at that point.
Absolutely.
I mean, to have a number 5 Billboard Hot 100 single, plus
MTV
top
constant
40
rotation,
album. I mean, man,
it was happening. I mean, it was great. I remember the Michigan State Fair people wanted us to headline a night at the State Fair. And our manager, I was like, yeah, I would love that, because I'd love to get back to Michigan and see people that I love and have them come down and see a big show at the State Fair. I mean, the full, huge, gigantic outdoor stage production kind of thing that you see in summer,
Right.
And I remember that, and our manager said, not yet. And he was right. He was just timing it so that the Freshman was like, and an inferno of fire that could not be denied. And then finally the State Fair people came back with the right amount of money, and he said, yes, we will do it.
Yeah.
And so that was great. That was great.
And that wraps up part 1 with our interview with Donny Brown. We want to thank you for coming to the studio. In 2 weeks, we'll be back here with part 2 to get through the rest of the Verve Pipe records, the stories behind the making of the music, and get into his illustrious solo career, including his solo spots live and in the studio and what he's up to now. We'd like to thank you all for tuning in, and we'll be back here in 2 weeks here at the MMHP in the 989.
The MMHP is hosted on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and our own Libsyn podcast site. You can also search MMHP 989 on Facebook for up-to-the-minute information, as well as both Dr. J and Sir Fred's album picks of the week, posted every weekend. You can connect with Scott on the web at scottbakermusic.com, Dr. J at michiganrockandrolllegends.com, Sir Fred at fredrife.com, and the Electric Kitch at electrickitch.com.
This podcast wouldn't be here without special help from Studio 163's Alan Garcia, our podcast videographer and wingman, Mr. Mike Beatty, MMHP tagline specialist, Mr. Eddie Switek, and of course, Gary Johnson, Fred Rife, the Electric Kitch, and all of our special guests, and especially you listeners. We want to thank you.
You've been listening to the MMHP in the 989. From all of us at the podcast, we want to thank you for tuning in.